Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Compliance Across Borders, EOR and Payroll Flexibility as Keys to Resilient Workforce Strategy, sponsored by Papaya Global. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credits. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. You will receive an email from hr.com within 2 business days. It will include the certification credit information. You may also log into your account and view the credits you have received. If you have any questions during the webcast, click on Q&A in your webinar controls and type them in. A quick disclaimer, this content is not legal advice. It is simply informative. Please consult your legal team for questions or concerns. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to our presenter, Gina Dorcelis.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Kathy, for that introduction. My name is Gina Dorcelis. I'm the Director of Global Employment at Papaya Global in the EOR space, working and assisting our clients with offboarding their global workers and handling transitions. I manage a team of attorneys based out one in Singapore, one in Europe, Israel, and in the Americas. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you in this webinar, having a conversation about jump right into the agenda regarding flexible global workforces and how that is critical to company success. Working on transitioning workers from EOR, payroll, and back, and the role of flexibility and how it drives innovation and resilience. And we will also leave time in the end for your long overdue questions. The secret of success is that we have gone to exceptional lengths to hire the best people in the world. I love this quote from Steve Jobs. It is very critical. At Papaya, some of our clients have workers all over around the world. We go to great lengths to keep our workers happy, having seamless onboarding processes. The key to a company's success is in the people. If you ask any successful business, any successful CEO, you will know that the key to a company's success is mainly in the people and attracting that talent. Here comes a poll. Kathy, we have a poll coming up.
The poll has been launched. I'll leave it open about 10 more seconds for everyone to get their responses in. The question is, what is the biggest challenge you face in managing a global workforce? Thank you, everyone, for participating. And these are the results.
The biggest challenges you face in managing a global workforce. Keeping up with the changing regulations, we have about 38%. Understanding the diverse international laws, 49%. Ensuring payroll accuracy across different regions, 5%. And the cost of hiring local expertise, 8%. This doesn't surprise me at all. Actually, I do agree that this is one of the most challenges that you face in managing a global workforce. It's handling all the diverse international laws all across the world. The laws are completely different from the US. And just speaking with the US alone, it's essentially 50 mini states and dealing with Europe. So I completely agree with the poll, and you're right on target. The first step is to understanding the issues, understanding that you don't know what you don't know. That is one of the most challenging aspects. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, organizations identify skill gaps and an inability to attract talent as the key barriers to preventing industry transformation. You have your skill gaps at approximately 60%, your inability to attract talent at 53%, and at the bottom two, you have your outdated or inflexible regulatory framework and skill gaps across organizations' leadership. This I find too with my clients is that the skill gaps in the local market, it can be particularly challenging, and the inability to attract talent, especially overseas when you're not familiar with certain regions, that can certainly be exceptionally challenging. Now, according to marketresearch.com, the global EOR market size is projected to reach 6 billion in 2028 from 4 billion in 2022. These growing needs of the company and the need for EOR is at an all-time high. Long gone are the days pre-pandemic when we would sit in a cubicle and be near our colleagues. Most of us have supervisors in different countries and managing workforces along the globe. So the need for EORs are going to simply be on the rise. Therefore, it's important to understand how to navigate the nuances of a flexible global workforce. Making the case for a flexible global workforce. Significant shift in the employment landscape. We're living in a world of limitless borders. Again, post-pandemic, long gone are the days of being in a cubicle. There's been a rise of the gig economy. And by that, there's been an increasing demand for flexible contingent workers. And what do I mean when I say flexible? It means adapting to the changing market conditions and business needs. So now that we've discussed some flexibility, later we're going to segue into the ease of transitioning from EOR, employer record services, to payroll and back. But before that, here comes another poll. What, in your opinion, is the biggest challenge when transitioning between different employment models? For example, EOR, payroll, and back. Is it understanding the compliance requirements, managing changes in payroll and benefits, ensuring data accuracy and consistency, integrating new systems and processes? Give everyone a second to submit their answers. Okay, the results are in. Again, we see a theme, understanding the compliance requirements, 43%. Second, ensuring data accuracy and consistency, 29%. That also can be particularly challenging. Integrating new systems and processes, 23%. Managing changes in payroll and benefits, about 6%. Hands down, understanding compliance requirements are the biggest challenge across the board. And hopefully we can provide you with some tools that can assist with understanding these compliance requirements, because it's particularly difficult for companies to navigate those nuances. Three components of a flexible global workforce strategy. It's transitioning across different employment models, addressing unique workforce scenarios. We'll discuss these topics in detail, and maintaining 100% compliance no matter what. This is the theme. To me, this is the biggest issue. While they're all important, maintaining 100% compliance no matter what. And that is consistent with what everyone is indicating in the polls, that the compliance aspect can be particularly challenging. Now, transitioning across different employment models from EOR to payroll and back. It's important to note that when you're switching from EOR and payroll, you have to not disrupt employees' experiences. You want to ensure that you don't lose workers in the onboarding process. Because if the workers feel the disruption, you may lose some workers while you're trying to adjust different employment models. Once you do that, you'll be able to enhance your workers' agility, your company's agility. You'll be able to maximize efficiency, and you will be able to empower your workers. Now, addressing unique workforce scenarios. How do you know when to choose between EOR and payroll and determining what is the best fit for your organization? Um, so before we're going from EOR and payroll and back, let's make sure we have a handle on employer of record of services. It can be particularly challenging. There can be EOR, POR, payroll, but let's delve into what an employer of record services is. EOR, otherwise known as employer of record service or employer of record, it allows your company to hire employees in locations where you do not have a legal entity. The employer of record functions as the legal employer of the global workers you hire. The employee signs the contract directly with the EOR. And the employee signs the contract directly with the EOR. However, the end client manages the day-to-day activities of the global workers. Now, in terms of payroll, is when the client has a legal entity incorporated in a particular country. Therefore, these workers are your direct employees as opposed to being a third-party employer. Now, what are some of the pros of an EOR? Why would you go from an EOR and payroll? At what point do you know to use an EOR? At what point would you know to use a payroll? You would use an EOR when you're expanding into new international markets. You want to test the waters. You have one worker in Brazil, you don't have an entity in Brazil, you want to service that to a third-party organization, and you want to expand into new territories. Temporary or project-based hiring. The company has a significant project and you just want to hire temporary workers. This isn't a long term. It would make sense to have an EOR. Another important aspect, and what everyone is alluding to in your poll responses, is navigating complex labor laws and compliance. Here, you would particularly let me go back. Here, you would particularly use an EOR to navigate complex. For example, if you want to onboard workers in France, France is a particularly challenging region, or if you want to onboard workers in Netherlands, in certain areas in Europe, navigating tax regulations. If you don't want to deal with this as a company, then an EOR it would be a benefit. When it comes to offboarding workers, having the EOR handle the severance, the performance improvement plans, the EOR will help you to navigate the complex labor laws and regulations, and that is completely outsourced from the company. Also, the EOR would streamline global hiring processes. The EOR ensures that there's compliant contract creation, ensure that the workers get their right benefits, that they're paid in the appropriate currency. There's just so many aspects of having an EOR that you can outsource. Now, just like with anything, an EOR has cons. Some of the cons of an EOR is you have to be wary of the regions and how many workers you have there because you run the risk of permanent establishment. And also, if you have workers in different regions, if you have some workers in the US, some workers in India, some workers in China, some workers in Japan, you have to manage several EORs. It could be very daunting. Another aspect to consider with EORs is time limits. For example, in countries like Germany, there's an 18-month restriction on labor leasing. Another aspect of EOR is it can be a gray area, particularly in countries in Europe. It's a gray area. It hasn't been tested by the courts. So that's one aspect to consider. And usually with an EOR, You can't terminate in the same capacity that you can when they are your direct workers. For example, in the case of redundancy, um, sometimes an EOR cannot make a worker redundant because they have other workers with other clients who hold those same roles. Therefore, you need to be very cautious with the EOR and come up with creative solutions, such as usually entering into mutual separation agreements with workers, which may lead to paying severance. Another aspect of the EORs that can be a con is, and especially I find this with my tech clients, is preserving intellectual property rights. Um, Often our clients or tech companies for sure want their IP rights assigned directly between the end client and the worker. However, in certain countries such as Belgium, you cannot assign IP rights directly to the worker. They would have to be assigned directly to the EOR. However, there are creative solutions, and Papaya definitely has creative solutions that you can, but certainly it's worth noting the con. Now, in terms of payroll, this is when the company has a legal entity in a particular jurisdiction and they are direct employees. One pro of having a payroll solution is that you're fully operational. You're fully operational in a country. You don't have the risk of a permanent establishment. There's legal clarity for your workers. The cost, also, you don't have to pay a monthly service fee to a third party. And what I find important, like with the EOR in the payroll space, the IP rights are directly secured. There's no restrictions on assigning IP directly to your clients, to your workers, excuse me. However, like with everything, there are cons when it comes to the payroll space. It takes a lot of time and resources for the payroll. The complicated process of incorporating the company, it's very, very daunting. And that's why a lot of companies prefer to have an EOR. It can take years to incorporate in certain countries in Europe, the cost of it. Also, I find you need to have the skills and the knowledge to navigate the local laws and regulations. This is the big one. It's all on you as the end client. You don't have an EOR that you can, rely on. Of course, you're going to be working with external counsel. Of course, you're going to have certain assistance, but there's nothing like being able to outsource that. So that's definitely one con. And the big one is all the legal liability rests with the business when it comes to payroll. So in the sense of the EOR will take liability. The EOR makes sure that workers are compliantly offboarded. However, in the payroll space, that's on the company, and that can take away from focusing on core business objectives if you're not up to date with the local laws in a particular region and you're trying to learn that along the way. I would not suggest, going into a region without having some type of knowledge, without having experts. But this is definitely a con of the payroll space. And once you determine whether EOR or payroll is more suitable for your workers, then you can capitalize on market opportunities. You can tap into the global talent pool. You can take advantage of business opportunities and also enabling scalability, streamlining operations so your workers can hit the ground running, having flexible, compliant contract creation. Also, cultivating resilience with your workers. Once you choose the best framework, you will be able to unlock new avenues for growth and sustainability. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. and it's so relevant. If you think compliance is expensive, then try non-compliance. This is by none other than General Paul McNulty, former U.S. Deputy Attorney. I absolutely love this quote. It's the bread and butter of what I do, ensuring that our clients are compliant, and it needs to be the bread and butter of what anyone needs to understand who has global workers overseas. Um, when it comes to compliance, navigating global regulations is challenging, right? We all know that. The cost can be exponential. The lack of compliance is a real issue. Right? The lack of compliance is a real issue. For example, we've all seen the cases in the media of misclassifying the many companies that have been penalized for misclassifying their workers as contractors when they should be employees, the substantial penalties and fines that they have received in the media without naming names. A quick Google search can see all the companies that have been filed for misclassification and the lack of compliance. The Department of Labor wage disputes, also from its, many companies who's not categorizing employees appropriately, whether it be hourly or salaried. Lack of compliance when it comes to offboarding workers. I've seen cases of companies paying six-figure penalties in regions in France and in Italy, knowing in regions where you can put the workers on garden leave or can pay them in lieu of notice. For example, understanding the nuances of, for example, in countries such as Netherlands, where a worker can be on sick leave with pay for 2 years, and particular protections in countries such as Australia and Spain, where there's particular protections for sick workers. The lack of compliance is just not worth it. If there's one takeaway, it's just not worth it. You're risking fees, litigation, and risk to your company's reputation, which can be the most daunting of it all. Here comes a poll. How confident are you in your organization's ability to navigate global compliance? Are you very confident? Are you somewhat confident? Or are you not confident at all? Somewhat confident brings it in at 54%. Not confident 31%, and very confident at 15%. I like those responses. I like the fact that, we all have somewhat confidence about this. The fact that you're even here today suggests that you know the issues and you want to learn more. I would be concerned if everyone was confident. So I think that we're right on the money here. We all have dib and dabble with regions, but in terms of compliance, we're on the right track. If everyone said that they were very confident, I would be concerned. Making the right decisions with local expertise. So now that we know the issues, we know the problems with offboarding workers improperly, we understand the different dynamics of compliance. How do you make the right decisions? What do you do? Um, to me, I believe the key is I can't stress the importance enough of having local experts on the ground where you have global workers. Consulting with global advisors that are familiar with different employment models. For example, terminating workers under the EOR model is completely different than terminating workers when you have direct employees. That's why it's particularly important to have local experts on the ground that can help you navigate it. And also You may be aware of what the statute indicates or what the law says, but you need to understand the customs of the particular country. And you can only get that from someone with local expertise. Even someplace like the United States, it's 50 many countries. Terminating a worker in the US, in New York, is completely different than terminating a worker in a place like California, where you need to ensure that the worker is paid the same day as they receive the termination notice within 24 hours. You need those local experts, even when it comes to an aspect such as jurisdictionally, and even in places like Canada in different provinces. So you definitely need local experts on the ground. Also, you need tailored guidance for unique situations, unique scenarios. You will need to know when to put workers on performance improvement plans, how long to put workers on performance improvement plans. These scenarios can take months. We delved into a bit of sick leave and how to navigate workers on sick leave. At what point can you terminate a worker on sick leave? Fully understanding the rights when it comes to maternity leave and labor laws. So you need tailored guidance for each scenario. One other aspect that I personally use as well is having up-to-date expertise. I have access, or you should have some type of access to top-of-the-line databases. This is a passive way of ensuring that you're up to date or have some knowledge going through your departments of global employment laws. Like I receive email alerts from top of the line databases with like the 5 global employment law summaries for the week. It's helpful because you can come across these issues with your global workers, and someone on your team, on your legal teams, on your HR teams can have some familiarity with these issues. Another aspect that I think isn't emphasized enough is paying attention to cultural and linguistic nuances. I think that this is overlooked significantly. I recently went to a seminar about 2 weeks ago in New York, where one of the panelists was giving a story about how, before the pandemic, one of the epitomes or of achievement in the US is having a corner office, whereas in other cultures, having a window office was an insult. So therefore, it's very vital that you pay attention to cultural and linguistic nuances, because there's different beliefs around the world and you don't want to offend your workers. And you also want your workers to have a tailored experience. If you have your EOR workers in India should feel treated the same way at the company as your EOR workers in Italy or Spain. So therefore, you need to pay attention to the cultural and linguistic nuances. And these all tie together, because how would you know the cultural and linguistic nuances? It's just important to not ignore or be ignorant to the culture of where you have workers. Building a flexible global workforce. Let's talk for a second about the future of the global workforce. Only the most agile companies are going to be able to compete and retain workers. You first need to ensure that you can hire globally with confidence. You can do that by having your network of vendors, having your local experts to assist with navigating regulations. Another aspect to consider is being able to retain the top talent. The only way you're going to be able to retain your top talent is if your workers believe you are compliant, you're up to date, something as simple as administering benefits, right? So understanding the different benefits that your workers are entitled to. With an EOR, ensuring that whether you do EOR or payroll, that your workers are entitled to receive the same pension plans or substantially similar, have the same similar PTO policies across the board. For example, if you have workers in one region, ensuring you're compliant, but administering, in order to retain the top talent, make sure you're up to date and fully understand all the benefits and nuances of each region. And in turn, you will be able to reduce your company costs. There may be legwork in the beginning, but while being able to retain top talent, you'll be able to reduce company costs by, using EORs where appropriate, navigating the payroll space where appropriate. And in turn, most importantly, you would enhance your company's professional reputation. I don't know if anyone has read Glassdoor at any point of their professional career, but these are the things that workers talk about. These are this is the reputation that follows your company. It's very important. And by being flexible, you will be able to retain the top talent. Now, introducing strategies that are going to enable your organizations to build a flexible global workforce. And how can you act fast by using technology? One aspect is to automation. We're in 2024, your HR processes, the wave of the future is automation. Onboarding, streamlining HR processes, which will assist with reducing risk and errors as it relates to contracts, as it relates to intellectual property agreements. The more automation, the better it is. Cloud-based solutions. The cloud-based solutions would streamline your onboarding processes, will help your workers get up to speed and hit the ground running. And also, lastly, flexibility by being able to transfer your workers between entities with ease by having easily transferable compliance documents between entities. Now, I'm going to touch in on some final points in terms of ensuring that you always reevaluate the needs of the business to stay in business. Flexibility, again, is critical. It's absolutely critical to your company's success. You have to ensure that you always reevaluate the needs of your business to stay in business, whether it be you determining if you need payroll, with determining whether you need EOR workers. The more workers you have in size, the more you may want to consider payroll. And also even determining whether you need freelancers. You always have to reevaluate the need of the business. Do not stay put in your prior position. We have to always be evolving. Compliance, the second aspect. So the first aspect is flexibility, which is critical to your company's success. Compliance, which can be daunting, but it's absolutely essential. By ensuring that you're compliant, you can minimize lawsuits, you'll decrease the high turnover, and you'll have enhanced compliance for brand reputation. In terms of the pandemic has taught us that the world is forever changing and that companies must change with it. This is the only way in the post-pandemic, post-gig world that you're going to make flexible in today's workforce in order to have a competitive edge, innovative, and grow in the ever-changing landscape. This is the way you'll have improved employee satisfaction and attract better talent by focusing on the needs of your business, which will be critical to success. Whether it be EOR or payroll, the ability of organizations to remain flexible is inevitable to company success. Okay, at this time, Kathy, don't know if there's any questions.
Yes, Gina. So here's the first one. Do you know how different we are between US and Canada in terms of labor compliance? And would you recommend to have an EOR?
Okay, I assume that the author is based in the US. So operating under that assumption in general, US and Canada can be similar. It depends on the state. So this is a very specific question, but generally speaking, Canada, in terms of they follow the common law notice in most provinces, so they tend to be very employee friendly, tend to be extremely employee friendly. Most cases, although in the employment contract, you don't find more than 1 to 2 weeks notice, there are times that you do, most of the workers, they do settle for a minimum to 4 to 6 weeks. This is just generally speaking, because in Canada, they consider situations such as your age, your ability to find employment. In terms of all the regions where I've dealt with, it's not the most challenging, but if I were to compare it to the US, it's definitely more employee friendly. I mean, with the caveat of California being one of the most liberal regions in the US.
Okay. The next question, Gina, is very long and there's
Mhm.
multiple parts to it. So,
Right, yeah, let's take it on. We got time.
yeah, here we go. A responsible employer who wants to understand the local compliance requirements in each country, other than contracting experts in each country, is there a list available of websites, including compliance checklist items by country, by department type, available that can be provided? This way, we can be educated in speaking with local experts to ensure we are doing the right things for employees and businesses. Other websites which can be provided to receive breaking news on compliance and HR and legal updates by country. So someone looking for a checklist.
Right. So I know on the Papaya website we have a knowledge base. I think it's available to the public. So that can definitely assist. I personally, I don't know if anyone from DLA Piper is on the line. I use, DLA Piper. That's I'll pay prescription. They send the five top global employment law updates weekly. Those are some of the things that I use personally to assist.
Perfect, thank you. Is Papaya Global present in Switzerland? Do you facilitate hiring, managing workers from that area?
Yes, absolutely. We have an EOR in Switzerland for if you wanted to outsource that. And I believe we also provide a payroll in Switzerland. I would have to confirm offline for the payroll, but for sure we have EOR workers in Switzerland. Recently dealt with many challenging offboardings when it comes to Switzerland. Switzerland, like most of the regions in Europe, when you're talking about termination of workers, you have to be very, very delicate. It's usually mutual separation agreement. I would definitely recommend some type of EOR in that space if you're not familiar with those regions, because penalties and in Switzerland and in European countries, you see workers walk out with six-figure settlements. And we have experts that assist with offboarding the workers, that speak the workers' language in terms of so that they can understand and help offboard those workers compliantly, ensure that they receive their payroll on time, and ensure that you're in compliance. When it comes to IP solutions, assigning rights, NDAs, non-solicitation, non-confidential clauses, we completely handle that. Our EOR has compliant contracts with the minimum obligations to the workers. If there's ever any litigation with the workers, we also participate in the collaborative effort to ensure that we offboard. So just for a company who isn't familiar with a particular region, trying to offboard on their own, I wouldn't recommend it. Whether it be Papaya or another company, but certainly Papaya, we do practice this in Switzerland. We practice in over 180 countries. We have workers, we have EORs or vendors in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East. And in addition to that, not only do we have employer of records, we have in-house counsel in every region of the world. I myself, I manage 4 different regions. but I myself am a licensed attorney in US who assists with the Americas. We also have a paralegal who assists with the US and Americas. We have a licensed attorney in UK based out in Germany who assists with offboarding in Europe. We have an attorney in Singapore that assists with offboarding in Asia. And we have an attorney in Israel that assists with offboarding in Middle East and Africa. So not only do we have EORs, we have licensed attorneys in-house, which are included in your EOR service that will assist with compliance issues. So
Thank
long
you.
answer.
Someone is asking for the name of the subscription again. You mentioned it in the previous questions.
It's a national firm, DLA Piper. So it's an international, one of the largest international firms. We partner with them, and they have subscriptions. And Papaya Global also has our knowledge base.
Thank you. Another question here. If you are familiar with Teamed Global and or Oyster HR, if so, can you please explain how Papaya is different from them?
So I don't know, I've heard of them, but I don't know specifically how they're different. I know that some companies like Team and Oyster, they don't have third-party vendors. They have they directly employ the workers and they have entities. Don't know if that's specifically for Team or Oyster, but just speaking in general for other people in the employment spaces, the issue with that is that the compliance aspect. So they have to resort to external counsel, which can significantly increase fees versus having in-house attorneys to handle these matters. So I think we have partners in all 180 countries. We don't have to go to external counsel. We have local experts on the ground only when necessary, which is included in the cost of your EOR service.
Perfect, thank you. Another question here. What is the biggest obstacle for companies to remain compliant in a global workforce?
I think one of the biggest obstacle is one of them also is staying compliant, but one aspect to understand also wasn't so much what we discussed today, but just so you know, is data privacy concerns. That's a major concern also as well when you're transitioning between different providers and transferring, especially in the case of Europe, all of these countries have data privacy protections and ensuring that you're in compliance with all the data privacy laws. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest obstacles. One of the biggest obstacles that I think our clients would consider their biggest obstacle is, preserving their intellectual property rights, in general when it comes to the EOR space, and hands down terminations. Terminations are the hardest, especially if you're dealing with US-based companies. US-based companies, we are used to at-will employment. However, in Europe and in most of these regions, workers are entitled to severance, workers are entitled to notice. So I would say some of the biggest challenges, if I had to sum it up into three, would be terminations, data privacy concerns, and lastly is making sure that your employees have a positive experience.
Thank you. What are some of the biggest challenges in hiring workers under the EOR model relative to payroll?
So I touched on some of them, but just to hone in, I would say number one, especially when it comes to tech clients, are intellectual property rights. In certain countries such as Belgium and France, the contract cannot directly assign IP to the worker. It has to be between the employer of record and the worker. And as you can imagine, our end client, may not be happy about that. It's your tech company, the worker is creating IP while they're employed. And here we have, you cannot assign IP rights. And that's just the law in some countries. So that's one aspect to consider is the law. So in the payroll space, you can do that. It's your worker. You can easily assign IP. So things like that. However, there are workaround solutions. Papaya, we're well versed in how to get creative solutions about that. In the EOR space, the more workers you have, the more likely you're risking a permanent establishment risk. In countries such as Germany and even Poland, you can only lease workers for 18 months at a time. In France, in the portage model, there's restrictions for 36 months. That's one other aspect to consider. So it's not your direct workers. So the whole point of the EOR essentially in certain countries is a short time temporary hiring. The more established you're going to be a region, the more workers you're going to have in a region, the more likely you may want to consider payroll. Hardest aspect about payroll is everything is on the business. The legal liability is on the company. And that can be daunting, whether you have workers in Canada, Netherlands, and this is why people resort to EORs. Or companies resort to EORs. It's very, very challenging to navigate these entire regions. So definitely downside to payroll is the legal liability. Is it worth it? That's what companies have to assess. Is it worth it? Do you have the resources? If you're a startup company, do you have the resources to navigate in certain regions? And also evaluating how challenging it is to terminate workers. Having workers in India may be easier than having workers in Italy. In Europe in general, it is particularly challenging to terminate workers. One of the most, I would say, easiest places in worker to terminate workers was the UK. But however, there's just been a bill introduced that's going to make this challenging, and it's going to mirror the rest of Europe. In UK, if a worker did not have, or that's still the law to this case, but if a worker has under 2 years of experience with a company, you can terminate them freely, of course, abiding by their notice provisions and minimum severance without it risking unfair dismissal. So I would say definitely the most challenging with EOR is it's a gray area in in countries in Europe. It can be a very gray area. You need to be prepared to settle via mutual termination agreement, risking permanent establishment. With payroll, it's the compliance that's the most challenging. Can you handle it? Can your company assume legal liability in all these regions? So you have to balance the risk and the benefits.
Thank you. Another question here. What do you see is the biggest challenge around global payroll?
Oh, that's a really good one. When it comes to global payroll, I would definitely indicate there's another compliance aspect with payroll is just paying workers on time. Also, it can be an issue with certain companies. I've heard horror stories from our clients when it comes to payroll, and also being able to process all these workers compliantly.
Okay, Gina, that looks like that was the last question in. Any final closing remarks before we sign off?
Right, absolutely. It was a pleasure speaking with you all today, and it's very challenging to navigate EOR and payroll and back. Just make sure that you ensure that in order to stay flexible in your global workforce, make sure you're up to date, have your databases, your subscriptions, your local experts on the ground on the butte, and this way you can focus on your core business objectives, the needs of the company, and absolutely will inevitably lead to the company's success. Also, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. Please request me. I'm, more than happy to answer any general questions you have about Papaya, about the EOR space. I have been working in the EOR space for a number of years, but prior to that, I did a lot of employment litigation. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have about the EOR space, and any questions, go to papayaglobal.com, look at our knowledge base. If you have any questions about any resources, I'm more than happy to assist.
Thank you. This concludes our webcast today. I would like to thank our presenter as well as all of you for joining us. If you would like to review this webcast again, the recording and slides will be available on hr.com on our archived webcast page. Check your account for your credits. Those will arrive within 2 business days. We also send out an email with the credit information. I would like to remind the audience to fill out a quick feedback survey that will open on a new tab on your screen. It only takes a few minutes, and your valuable input is key to improving the quality of our webcasts. We hope you all can join the next session at 12 noon. To join in, click on over to the hr.com event auditorium and enjoy the rest of the event.